Hello there, and welcome to this podcast brought to you by Unga Farm Care and its partner Nutrition from the Netherlands. This is the fourth in a series of podcasts we will be releasing over the coming months, in which we will discuss all the most common challenges that a professional dairy farmer faces. We will talk about the calves, the heifers, as well as the transition cows and the various topics related to these groups. My name is Frans van Bohemen, and in this podcast we will have a closer look at the role of calcium in a transition period. Why is calcium important to begin with? What risks are associated with hypocalcemia? And how should you feed the cows to minimize the risk for hypocalcemia after calving? If you have any questions about this podcast or if you have any suggestions you'd like to share, please take up contact with the Unga Farm Care representative closest to you or call 0719 26 2909. That is 0719 26 2909. The transition period is the most critical period of lactation. This is because of the many changes a cow needs to go through during this period. Getting the transition period right puts you on course for an excellent milk yield and reproductive performance of the cow with minimal health challenges. To be sure, we define the transition period as the 2 months prior to calving, also known as the dry period, as well as the first month after calving, which we call the fresh period. That means the total transition period covers a period of 3 months. During the last 2 months of her pregnancy, a cow is not producing any milk anymore. We should take that into account while feeding the animals. Good management and feeding during the transition period are not so much about fulfilling the requirements at that particular stage of the transition period, but is all about making sure we adapt as good as we can to the needs of the animal. Try to see the transition period from the perspective of your cow to help you understand what she needs and how to best meet those needs. Calcium is one of the most important minerals around calving and is therefore a classic example of the adaptations we need to make to help cows pass through the transition period healthily. Failing to do so comes with considerable risks for metabolic diseases, low milk production, and poor reproductive performance. We need to start at the beginning. Why is calcium important for the animal? Calcium contributes to the movement of the cow's muscles. When the cow's blood contains too little calcium, she has a harder time coordinating her muscle movements. If blood calcium levels reach below a critical level, it may even stop her heart, leading to the death of the animal. A cow has two ways to absorb calcium from her diet and put it into her blood. One is a passive method, which does not cost her any energy. The other method is active and is highly adaptive. When the cow needs more calcium, she is able to meet that demand by upregulating her active calcium absorption. When no additional calcium is needed, she will minimize her active absorption of calcium and rely primarily on passive absorption of calcium. Under normal circumstances, the passive and active methods of calcium absorption work very well. However, around calving, when lactation starts, her demand for calcium suddenly rises sharply. If the cow is not prepared to meet this suddenly rising demand for calcium, she runs the risk that the level of calcium in her blood decreases, leading to hypocalcemia. Hypocalcemia can be the trigger that sets off a cascade of problems downstream. Whether an animal suffers from hypocalcemia is difficult to see from the outside. Only clinical hypocalcemia is easy to determine. In that case, the animal is on the floor, unable to stand up, she is listless, and her ears are cold. However, clinical hypocalcemia does not occur very often. You should assume that for every case of clinical hypocalcemia you see, there will be about 25 cows suffering from subclinical hypocalcemia. Especially older cows stand a bigger chance to suffer from hypocalcemia than first calving heifers. Subclinical hypocalcemia is much more difficult, if not impossible, to observe. Symptoms of a cow suffering from subclinical hypocalcemia include low milk yield, the cow is slow, and her general appearance is dull. It just seems like she's not well and didn't get a very good start after calving. However, plenty of cows don't show any signs at all that they are suffering from low blood calcium levels. All in all, there are probably many more cows that suffer from hypocalcemia than you would expect based on your own observations. It is therefore important to take adequate measures to prevent hypocalcemia as much as possible. Look, hypocalcemia does not need to occur. With a good feeding strategy, it is not difficult to prevent the great majority of cases. Preparing a cow for the onset of lactation is like training her for a marathon. If the training program is successful, she is likely to run her marathon without a problem. All throughout the dry period, you should feed as little as possible calcium. That means no premixes or mineral packs that contain calcium, no lick blocks with calcium, and no green forages or hay, as those usually contain relatively high levels of calcium too. Instead, feed straw, maize, soybean meal, and maize bran or wheat bran. To supplement the right minerals, add Unga Afiabora dry cow minerals. Of course, always make sure the cow drink plenty of fresh water. Feeding little calcium triggers the cow to upregulate her active calcium absorption mechanism. With her passive absorption mechanism alone, she will not be able to completely meet her calcium demand anymore, which forces her to make use of her active absorption mechanism. Once the cow has calved down, you completely reverse your feeding strategy. Instead of feeding as low as possible calcium, you now should feed plenty of calcium. Use Afiabora Maziwa Tele to cover the drastically changed mineral requirements of the cows. Additionally, you can provide lick blocks that contain calcium too. This is also when you can offer fresh forages or haze again. Going from a low calcium diet pre-calving to a high calcium diet post-calving allows the cow to make use of the additional calcium efficiently when she needs it most, which is immediately after calving. If the cow is insufficiently prepared for the surging calcium demand post-calving, she will need about 2 days to activate her backup systems. Those 48 hours are the risk period for a cow to suffer hypocalcemia and are enough to trigger numerous metabolic challenges such as retained placenta, displaced abomasum, low milk yield, ketosis, and low reproductive performance. Preventing hypocalcemia as much as possible can save you a lot of money and trouble. If you are unsure whether one of your animals suffers from hypocalcemia, do not apply an intravenous calcium drip preventatively. This will make matters worse. Only apply a drip in case you need to rescue the animal from clinical hypocalcemia. Adding calcium into the blood of a subclinically hypocalcemic cow will make her shut down her active calcium absorption mechanism, which puts her at risk of a collapse as soon as the added calcium drains out of the blood. In this case, you can only wait until she gets better. Doing nothing in this case is far better than applying a drip preventatively. In conclusion then, the transition period is the most important period of lactation. A good transition period usually comes with a good lactation period and early start of next gestation. Calcium is a critical mineral. A cow needs very little calcium during the dry period, but a lot of calcium at the start of lactation. You should meet those demands by feeding as little as possible calcium during the dry period and more than enough calcium during the fresh period. Training the cow well for the sudden rise in demand for calcium at the beginning of lactation is an important step to a successful transition period. And that was it for today's podcast, brought to you by Unga Farm Care and its partner Nutrition from the Netherlands. Would you like to learn more about good management and feeding during the transition period and the products that fit such strategy, reach out to the UNGA representative closest to you. I encourage you to also do so if you have any questions or suggestions otherwise. Stay tuned for new podcasts being released soon.